There's my dog. All right. So we'll do the little portion of the day that's great talk by myself and anyone who wants to jump in on thoughts in this department. Co-founders, culture, recruiting, the touchy-feely parts of your business. First things first, I did remember to record already. Nice. Okay, and this is the schedule for today. This is the same as last time. That's the big idea. We'll do the pod breakouts, 1 o'clock, come back, and then we have a cool guest panel again with two of our mentors, Dallas and Michael Blend, and Eitan Elbaz, who together with his brother founded what became AdSense, Applied Semantics, got bought by Google back in the early days, and has also gone on to found Scopely and other billion-dollar companies. And Edith Harbaugh, who was Harvey Mutter around a year younger than me, who has started with another Mutter a business called Launch Darkly, which is doing really well and raised, I don't know, $100 million or something. And then we'll do our breakouts where you can talk to them. And rename yourselves for my purposes of helping break out people to the correct rooms. Please do so immediately, if not sooner. Don't forget about Reddit, r/HMC INQ. Don't forget about Slack, hmcinq.slack.com for communications. We also sell the emails. Don't forget, October 23rd, still scheduled for Zoom demo day. Don't forget, Tuesday Lunch Club. I'll just send out calendar invites. That seems to be the best way to confuse everyone. And we're going to do again next week. I think this was actually pretty good. I got good feedback, and I thought it was good to do the actual sort of one-on-ones or one-on-a-fews mentor office hours. So I'm going to definitely keep doing that. And I think this time, at least for my office hours, I want whoever signs up to be to have a 1-minute pitch of your company ready, complete with one slide. And I think that'll be a requirement for pitching at demo day, that you will have had to done the mentor office hours at least once, if not multiple times. And just because you did it once, please sign up again. And that'll be at hmcinq.com/OO, which for some reason I thought stood for office hours. And it wasn't until the 5th time I typed it in that I was like, oh, it should have been OH. So anyway, it's at OO for office hours. Okay, co-founders. Now, that's a big question. A lot of people probably in this Zoom call are wondering about, how do I find a co-founder, or is my co-founder a good co-founder, et cetera. Here's a quote from the guy who ran Y Combinator for a little bit, Sam Altman. He was handed off the reins from Paul Graham. It's better to have no co-founder than to have a bad co-founder, but it's still bad to be a solo founder. That's generally the wisdom, the conventional wisdom of accelerators and VCs. Is it's hard to get funding as a solo founder, just because it's sort of they have fewer resources, and they apparently can't get anyone excited enough to join them as a co-founder. And when you think about it from a VC's perspective, of course you would want a co-founder, right? It's sort of a de-risk for them, because what I've found is, in my opinion, is that generally what makes a company successful is most of the time it's one of the founders. The really big successful companies, there's usually one founder who is sort of the super special sauce, the superhero part. And sometimes they're solo co-founders, sometimes they have a co-founder or 2 or 3, but usually it kind of comes down to the one, Bill Gates, probably more than Paul Allen, or things like that. But if think of it as a VC investing, you're essentially hiring these co-founders as almost employees in a way, and you get to take multiple shots on goal with if there's 2 co-founders, I've just sort of doubled my chances that one of them is awesome. And it didn't cost me anything extra. You don't usually have a higher multiple, maybe a little bit higher valuation, just because you have multiple co-founders, or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. It's probably going to be a similar valuation. So from a VC perspective, totally makes sense. And it's a little less risky. Now, from the founder's perspective, it's not exactly the same. Just like doesn't mean you need to take VC. A VC would say you do need to take VC, but as a founder, you don't. As a founder, you don't need to go looking for a co-founder just because that's what you hear you're supposed to do. I think it just like with VC, like if it makes sense, like if you really need the money to grow, yeah, you probably need to raise some money. But don't just do it because you hear that's how it goes. And like if you think you really need a co-founder to get either motivated or a missing piece, or you guys are just already working on it and it just makes sense, you're so excited, that's fine. But if you're like on your own and just worry that you don't have a co-founder, I'd say don't worry about that so much. Worry about getting your product out and getting customers and talking to them. Here's a little chart of someone who did analysis on the TechCrunch database of companies by how many co-founders they had and how likely they were to have a successful exit. And it was actually TechCrunch's own analysis of their own data. So I don't know. It doesn't look exactly like the same as what Sam Altman is preaching here, that it's better to have co-founders. So it seems like, I don't know what a definition of a successful outcome is, but it looks like it sort of diminishes the more co-founders you add. Think of it like working on a team project, a group project at school, where how often are you just like so happy with everyone on your team being so great and pulling their weight, and you're just happy to be on that team? I don't know.
But Josh, is that chart showing most companies were started by one founder?
No, this was a chart of, I shouldn't have cut off the top, but it was literally, no, it's not the breakdown of companies. Unless, does that add up to 100%?
I think so.
Does it?
Yeah, it does.
5.1. Ignore everything I've said so far.
But there's no way that
all right, you know what? It was the next one. It was a very similar chart though. Go Google it. TechCrunch.
Yeah, it does show that. It does show that a lot of successful companies are one founded.
Solo founder, six. Oh, you know what? It was two charts right after each other, and it was that first one was probably the breakdown, and I took a screenshot of the wrong one. The second one, which looks identical, is the chance that they. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Number of startups that have raised. Oh, you know what this was? Oh, no. Okay. All right. It does add up to 100 because this is the number of startups that have secured a successful exit broken down by the number of founders associated with the company. So more than half the companies that had a successful exit had one founder. So a little bit, this is showing you that most companies have one founder. So if anything, I'm not sure if it makes you more likely to succeed, but don't feel like you're a weirdo if you have no co-founder, okay? There's more than you think, just by what it seems like in the world of VCs, that like you need a co-founder.
Quick question. Are you differentiating, well, not differentiating, but if you have one founder, but then you approach a VC, but you have a team, like, does that weigh better, like, or different? Like if you were gonna, you had two co-founders and a team behind them versus one founder and a team behind them, does that start to look a little bit similar to each other? Like, oh, okay, so they actually have.
Yeah, it's probably, I'm thinking like really early, you're the only one, you know? Yeah. That's a little harder for them to get excited about. Now, if you're already like, the more traction you have, the more you've de-risked, then yeah, they're gonna look at other aspects. But when you're really early, it's kind of a team bet. And so if there's no team besides you, it's harder for them to really believe that you're the awesome one that's going to make it happen when you haven't built a team at all. But yeah, if you have.
And then they hear the idea and then they say, oh, wait, yeah, you are the awesome one.
Yeah. But, and so going back to the my mantra here of entrepreneurship, the sort of the number way companies die, right? Like as long as you don't give up, you know, your company doesn't end, right? You can always take a day job and keep it going and keep pivoting and keep trying stuff and keep putting in your own money or getting more credit card debt or whatever, right? Like the way it really ends is you give up. And the best way that a company, you know, makes everyone give up is co-founder issues, right? It's a breakup of the co-founders, and then that, the baby dies because the parents are fighting over it. So in that department, at least you're taking on some risks by doing things on your own, but you're taking on a whole different risks by doing things with other people too. So especially at the top. Yeah, I think it really comes down to if you're the superstar, right? Like I was saying, I think what makes companies succeed is them having a superstar, and there's different levels of superstar. And it depends if you're that superstar who can kind of do everything, or if you're the kind of superstar that needs to add another complementary superstar and find a co-founder. It's starting to look better when you're the Flash and not Wonder Woman, that you might actually benefit from a co-founder. So the other question, once you do decide to have a co-founder, that comes up a lot, is sort of what's the right equity split between co-founders? And I used to point people a lot to this website, founders.com with no E, which was actually kind of a cool little spreadsheet that literally just asks you things like, who's put in some money, who's quit their day job, who's required for industry expertise, who's the technical founder, who's this and that, and you try and check it all off, and you put in how many founders you have, and it kind of gives you a breakdown, which usually seem pretty reasonable. But recently I was sort of looking at, the Y Combinator idea is a little differently on co-founder equity split. It's basically, they say it should be even. Like if you don't think that your co-founder is worth or equal, I mean, it doesn't have to be 50-50 exactly, or 33-33-33, but it should be in that ballpark of like 55-45 or something, or 60-40. Like if it's something where it's like 90-10, it's just sort of it kind of shows you're not really co-founders essentially. But for some reason you can't address that, and there's something wonky there. So if you're really talking about co-founders, I think you need to be talking about like equal, close to equal. And of course, I didn't put down like 25-25-25 or 20-20-20 here, or 16.6666 times. Generally, and of course, Primos was an exception that proves the rule. But you don't really want to have more than 3 co-founders, I think. It's not as common as you see the distribution in that chart, but yeah, it's just a lot of chefs, and maybe you have 3 co-founders, and if you can't get everything you need out of 3 people for your company, like it's sort of interesting. And you're just adding, like every network, right? It's a square of the number of people in it for the communication issues and the chances for some kind of drama, and just okay. And there's always the one solo co-founder. Another benefit of that, not even speaking about your chance of success, is obviously you're giving up a lot of equity when you have a co-founder. That first co-founder, that 0 to 1 co-founder, is a big jump in equity. I know Flexport, that's a really successful YC company that was a solo founder, that's worth $2 or $3 billion now. He's credited being a solo co-founder is very useful because he was able to give a lot more generous amounts of equity to his early employees. Like he was able to raise money and not be so concerned about giving up equity, and he could raise more money that way. And then he could use that money plus more equity to hire really great super rock stars as his early employees. And you get kind of miserly when you already like have 3 co-founders and you're like, I'm already down to 33%. Like, I don't know if we should raise money, because I don't want to give up another 20% of that. And now I'm down to 25%. And what if we have to hire employees? We're going to give up 20%. Now I'm down to under 20%. And so there's definitely different ways that you can get value out of that initial equity besides a co-founder early on. So that's another aspect. And then there's just stuff like, hey, when you do a typical sort of VC route, and there's 3 co-founders, and you do pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B, Series C. I mean, you get to $1 billion exit, you are hopefully getting still like 9% or something, or 8% or something of the company, which would be great on $1 billion exit. But, maybe it's even a $200 million exit. You're talking about 15, 16 million is your take. It might be easier to be a solo co-founder and get to a $15 or $16 million exit, and have 100%. If you're really thinking about just like math on that. Another interesting thing, this is just with the co-founders, this goes back to the equity split, is when you see that really uneven equity split, it kind of is a lack, it sort of reflects a lack of trust maybe, that you're not necessarily that you think they're like going to scam you, but you don't really trust their value, right? Or they don't trust your value. They don't really think you're a real co-founder. And it's important, you know, I mean, that's kind of the core thing. The first thing you got to get right in your company is that the founders just need to be really locked in. Like, you don't want to have a big mismatch on like, one of the founders is right out of college or in college. The other founder is a 65-year-old, you know, industry, you know, veteran who's sort of like, seems like they should be a mentor, but they're kind of calling themselves a founder. And the one person has, you know, kids and mortgage to pay, and the other person's living with their parents. And not that you don't trust each other, but it's just like a mismatch, and you just know that your incentives aren't aligned. I think at DreamHost, we had a lot of things kind of wrong and dumb with the way we set up our co-founders, but we were at least like all four of us were just the same state in our lives and careers, and the same amount of wealth, which was zero apart from the company, and totally equal breakdown. And we disagreed on a lot of stuff and argued and fought, but I think we all like trusted each other. It was very, you know, safe in that regard. So there was never like a company killing moment of like just not being able to go forward because you're worried about, you know, politics with your co-founders. Okay. That's all I have to say about co-founders for now. Culture and leadership, and in general, how your company, you know, your non-co-founders or your co-founders too, really create the environment that helps you then recruit and be successful and everything. So it starts with the co-founders. It starts at the top. All the culture comes from the leadership, right? You can see a perfect example in our current commander-in-chief in America, and good or bad, it all is monkey see, monkey do, right? You know, do as I say, not as I do, doesn't really work. You've got to exhibit whatever you try, and you can't just say the culture is something. It has to be what you as the founder or you as the co-founders are actually practicing, and it'll get reflected down to first employees, the managers, and then under them the whole way down. One of the things I also harp on, right, is this is really true. If you want something done right, you should do it yourself. And it's sort of a management thing where the contrapositive of that, I guess, would be if you let someone else do it, you have to be okay with it not being done right. So it sort of works both ways, where you're like, if it's so important that you really can't trust your employees or your co-founders to do it, then just, you know, do it yourself. And if you're not willing to do it yourself and you're assigning it to someone else, to an employee or a co-founder, you got to let them do it the way that they're going to do it, because you're getting into micromanaging and just pulling the, you know, pulling out all support and faith they have that they can actually have some autonomy to do their job the way they feel fit. And I think if you have to choose between, you know, you got to pick the battles. Like if it's a super critical, important company killing thing, then you really honestly feel like they're screwing it up, then you probably need to do it yourself. But most things, like, you got to decide if it's not worth your time to do it, don't get too upset when it's done differently. And that's just like a good culture. The other thing, this goes back to that first quote I think Gary said at one of our meetings about enjoy yourself and figure out how to make money. I think the key, right, to a long, big, successful company is that compounding of interest, which means it has to last a long time. And the key to something lasting a long time, and whether a long time is 10 years or 10 months, or, you know, if it's a rocket ship or whatever, is that the people involved have to want to do it, right? And they have to be happy. So I think it's pretty important to, even in a crazy startup, right, it's got to be fun. There's got to be sort of a mission or a story getting people excited so that they enjoy the startup. Because if you're, like it's usually there's easier jobs, and there's probably jobs that make more money. at least in the short term. So hopefully the reason that people are doing this job, or including yourself, is because it's more fun. So your culture should be about fun. It doesn't mean like wacky, crazy necessarily, but like it needs to be an enjoyable environment. This is a thing I say, it's sort of like raising kids. Like when you do have employees in your company, it's not necessarily that you guys have kids, but if you have that experience, I use this sort of mantra, just a good thing to remember, of setting expectations and knowing if someone's really doing a good job and needs to be promoted, or doing a bad job and needs to be let go, or just in general what to expect from your team. And it's sort of a cop-out answer, I guess, but it's just be reasonable, right? But you got to have a sense of like, which is why it's important maybe to have be technical yourself, right? If you find your technical team is taking a really long time to do something and you have no idea if that's reasonable or not, it's hard. It's hard to manage it, and it's hard to have a successful company. If you've done it before yourself and you've gone through a few things with other people and you have a sense of the distribution of, technical ability and how long it should take, and you think it should take 4 days and your team's taking, 6 weeks, right? That's where you can get a sense of just, is this a reasonable amount of time? Is this a reasonable performance? So, same with a kid, like what you expect from a 2-year-old is different what you expect from a 15-year-old. And it's not like a hard and fast rule, but what's reasonable, like the kind of responsibility and accountability that should be required, based on their thing. This is another part of the culture I call cash rules everything around me. So it's very tempting, and it's sort of, a common strategy to kind of underpay employees in an early stage startup, usually because you have to, because you don't have any resources. And hopefully you're making it up with equity, either vesting or their co-founders, and it's making it worthwhile. But it's kind of a dysfunctional situation. You can't really go on that long without people taking home, earning what they're worth. And so, and there's a lot of things where you can get perks and give them like, now it's all work from home anyway, so it's hard to have these nice office perks and things. So really cash compensation is sort of the best surefire way to get the best people, like long-term. I mean, it's what like Netflix does. They're just like, we just pay everyone 50% more than they would normally make. And then we have the best people who work, who are worth 3 to 10 times more. And it's a good deal. Now, easier said than done. Hopefully you get to that point, or you raise enough money that you can actually pay people more than what they're worth. So you can get the best people. The way to get there is the same sort of thing I talked about. I call it ROE. It's like ROI, return on investment. It's return on effort, but it's the 80-20 rule. Just always be focused on that. And you'll find you have enough resources to get the best people. It's the same thing with people, right? Like the top 20% of people do 80% of the work. So if you pay them 50% more than average and don't hire that bottom 80%, you're going to be fine. And you're going to have a great culture. So this is a part that ties into culture. There's always a little bit of a conflict, a little bit of tension between these groups. Your current employees, your customers, your current customers, your prospective customers, your investors. Employees want to get paid a lot and not do any work. Customers want all their stuff for free and not pay anything, and so on. Investors want you to make lots of money and not spend anything on employees and get lots of customers. So they're always fighting each other a little bit. And I would say that when you have to decide, hopefully you can help, hopefully you can make all these people happy. You got to really make a hard choice between two of these. This is my priority that I think works. It's in the order I wrote it, right? If you have to choose between employees and existing customers, go with your employees, right? If you have to choose between existing customers and getting new customers, go with your existing customers. Make them happy before you worry about getting new customers. If you have to worry about any of these people versus your investors, screw your investors. Like they're just in it for the money, and they've already given you the money, and they're going to be happy because you're taking care of your employees, who are going to take care of your customers, who are going to refer new prospects, and then you're all going to succeed and the investors will be happy. And it kind of makes sense. All these things kind of just tie into how loyal they are to your company, right? Like your employees are working there. You've got to be more, faithful and trust, your employees more than a customer who just kind of interacts with you randomly. Existing customers already have signed up with you and have been using you. You got to trust them and work with them more than a prospective customer. And yeah, investors don't really even enter into it. The last little dimension on this is, gotta make this chat bubble go away so I can click in the right spot. There we go. Throwing founders into there, because founders are a little different from employees, but they go at the top, which could just be you, or it could be you and your co-founders. But just because if the founders aren't happy, it's like the parents having a divorce or whatever. It just screws up the whole family. And so you got to make sure that you're happy and your founder relationship is good and you are all on the same page or whatever it is. And employees are going to be happy because they see that their founders know what they're doing and are effective with each other. And so moving on to recruiting, this is sort of, it all really follows from this, that like when you've got a healthy culture, you're making money, you've got a good team at the top, it's a lot easier to get, just like customers refer other customers, employees refer their employees. And if you've got great employees, they're going to refer great employees. This is just a quote that's sort of a straightforward one, that in terms of hiring and recruiting, it should be, it's just like with the VC thing and the co-founder thing, that like, do it when it makes sense. Don't think that like, it's funny because people ask, because it's rude to ask how much money you make. They ask how big your company is, like how many employees do you have? You say, oh, I have a startup. And they're like, cool, wow, how many employees? And you're like 50. And then they go, oh, and they're just trying to translate and go, that's a serious company. You know, they really just want to know like how much revenue do you have? But they don't say that. So you get it conflated a little bit about like big successful company equals lots of employees, but you know, much better to be a company with 3 employees who's making $100 million than a company with 100 employees who's making $3 million, right? And it should always be just like, yeah, it's so obvious that you need to hire someone. That's when you hire. And generally, you know, within a day or two, I would say at most a week, if someone's good or not. It's so hard to tell before you hire them for some reason. And it's so easy once you work with them for like 2 days that you're like, oh, and they don't usually change. Or you are always tempted to like, I'll just rearrange this structure and put them in here. And I just got them in the wrong department, or this is something they can train. And it's really like, I don't know, let them go and move on. And no one ever regrets firing someone. It feels like.
Josh, tell a story of, you know, in that 2 days when you were like, oh man, thank God they're here. And then another one in 2 days where you're like, damn it, I messed up.
Well, I don't want to, you know, name names, but there's definitely some people that we got, you know, I'm not saying DreamHouse is good at this, but we hired someone and in 2 days, it was like, this is not good. And I believe they were there for another 12 years or so. We worked around them forever. And there are some people, well, a lot of times with us, we hired only kind of in through tech support, and it was kind of, we trained people up. And so I feel like that actually worked pretty well, where it was like, it gave people a lot of time to kind of develop in the company. And it also helped them sort of, the culture sort of stayed the same, because once you start hiring in like C-levels and really high up management people, like just in, that's when you can lose control sort of your culture. They're going to bring in their culture and they're going to try and build up their team underneath them. DreamHouse, we just always hired at the bottom and people just worked their way up. And so it wasn't so much of that. It was only like maybe later when we were starting to hire people higher up, because at the bottom level, it was like anyone could kind of do it, and we would train them and we'd sort of mold them like clay. And some never really made it past that earlier level, and others were just sort of rocket ships, and we're like, oh, they learned to program. Oh, they're fixing bugs for the other tech support people. Okay, maybe they can do more development and less tech support. And now they're in the data center, like on their own volition, doing things. Now they've learned that. Maybe they should run this data center. So you had those people. It wasn't like 2 days in, but it was quick that they were good at what they learned. You know, they started from scratch and they started from the bottom. Now they're here. And yeah, this is a similar thing about just, if you have a good team and you keep that core great culture, those people are only going to want to work with other people like themselves or better, right? Like if you have enough self-confidence that you know you're good, but you've got these weaknesses, you actually want to hire people who fill those weaknesses, and you're going to learn from them, and you know it's going to be fun. Whereas if you're someone who's kind of worried about your job and career and feel like you don't know what you're doing and just want to be lazy, you don't want to hire people who are great and make you look bad, right? You want to hire in little minions and build your fiefdom. and then it goes downhill. Little quote I threw in here. Still, we made it work. We hired so many people that I would say were but we had a good system. They started at the bottom. Anyway, the other thing about the leadership and the culture that helps with recruiting, and it's starting at the top, is this thing that they call it servant leadership, where really you just got to trick yourself as the leader. It's so easy as the boss, the co-founder, the CEO, whatever you are, to just boss people around. And it's sort of a dysfunctional relationship in a lot of ways. The better way to be a boss is to think of yourself, just do a mind trick where you think of them as your boss. Like if they send you an email or they come into your office, try and pretend that they're your boss and they just sent you an email, or they just came into your office. You just went into their office, and your demeanor is different, right? You're so polite and you're so working hard for them, and they're going to be super like that because you actually are their boss, and it just makes this really healthy relationship. And it's hard though, because you just get lazy and you're like, this idiot, and I'm the boss sometimes. And then you're like, what if that was my boss? What would I do? Here's their little checklists of what it means to be a good servant leader. Like your job really at the top is to help make sure everything works, like that your superstars are unleashing their talents. You're just a coordinator and assister, and you're not the one. You're just the network overlay. I'll just let you look at that or go back and look at the recording. This is going long. All right, one more thing about culture is, of course, diversity. I mean, it was hard at DreamHost. Our co-founders, we were 4, 19-year-old white guys attending Harvey Mudd, majoring in computer science. There wasn't like any diversity in essentially ethnicity, gender, age, background, anything. And we went, I don't know what it's like now, but female wise, we ended up with 4% female or something like that. Well, for the first 10 years. And you got to address it super early. And it's important because diverse teams perform better than monoculture teams. And there's always a little bit of an argument of well, what if there's a group of talented people that's this big, and then this other group of talented people is only this big? Then won't the natural thing be that we'd have let's say 9 of this group and 1 of this group, because there's 9 times as many of them as there is of these? And that would be true if it was random. And then, but the thing is your team would actually be better if it wasn't 9 of one type and 1 of the other. If whatever it is, if it was at least 3 of one type and 7 of the other, or 5 and 5, would be better. And so it doesn't mean that you have to go just taking less qualified people from one group to try and balance it out. There is enough qualified people in every group. There are enough superstars of every type for your startup, right? Don't worry about the world ratio that you might imagine there is. You can make your startup better, your company better, by taking the top 5 from this group. If there's only 10 people in that group that were qualified, you could still take the 5 and put them in your company. You don't have to be oh, there's only 10 in the world. So it's something, and you have to start at the best is if your co-founders are, but at least your early employees are. You got to think about it, because by default, and it's hard with a startup because you don't have the resources to consider these kind of things early on, but it's hard to switch later. It's hard to sort of fix it, because it becomes self-fulfilling, where people come into your company, for a while, we hired every female who applied at DreamHost, and we couldn't keep them. They would take the job, but they'd come in for a week or 2, and it was just such a culture, a bro culture, or even if it wasn't that bad, it was just they just look around and go, I'm the only female here. And it's hard to break in, be I'm going to keep that. We're going to hire more females, right? It gets hard. I mean, we finally, or they finally did it. I've been out for 7 years myself. Here's a little quote. I guess probably, there are 3 things you want out of somebody. You want them to be good, you want them to try hard, and you want them to be nice and get along, right? The no assholes rule. And it's hard sometimes. You feel like you get somebody who's amazing and really productive, and they're just kind of a cancer to work with. They're just a jerk or whatever. It's probably not worth it. Like, I don't know if I had to choose between those three, which one I would say is the most important, but it sounds like Elon. I know, I don't know this quote. But I think I think it's correct. Sort of funny he said it. But the thing that really helps with recruiting and all that, like, is that there needs to be a story behind your whole company. And that helps for your co-founders, your culture, your recruiting. Everything is sort of like, what's the point? Why? People want to have a reason that they're doing their job. Of course, they want mastery, autonomy, but they want purpose. And Elon has been good at that, of like telling a story, whether it's we're going to save the planet or we're going to colonize Mars. It's an interesting story, and it means he can recruit people more easily. He can get free advertising you know, he can pay less or whatever he wants to do for his means, but you got to tell a story. And that's just the whole part of whether you're just an idea trying to pitch to somebody, or your company's already $1 billion or $400 billion. Like, you've got to keep a story going if you're trying to grow and be a startup. If you've become just a factory, that's different, but that's not what we're really talking about. All right, that's it for this pitch. We went a little over. We started a little late. Any questions before we break out into pods again? Let me check if people have been naming themselves.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah.
On the diversity topic, I run into this myself. So often as a leader, you're trying to shape a culture. And he talked about like bringing someone in and then bringing their culture. You're like, oh no, like I'm losing control of my culture. But then on the other hand, you want diversity, right? And so diversity in cultural ideas is also a sense of diversity. How do you think of balancing those two things?
Right. Diversity in the actual culture. I think there's some, yeah, like your culture is going to evolve and change as things go. I think there are just some cultures that are better than others, like objectively, of like a healthy work-life balance, maybe, just, you know, accountability and performance. And
hope you go to school too.
So, I don't know. Anyone else want to add any thoughts on that? I'll just mute Desmond for a second. Sorry, Desmond.
Yeah, Josh, it's Jason. I'll add a few thoughts, because we've kind of encountered some of this week at the company I'm running. So you're right in that, and I totally agree in that, like, certain cultures are objectively better, right? Cultures that favor sort of like honesty, transparency, kind of the ethos where you're sort of like, you know, working together to solve a shared problem, as opposed to like functional teams kind of working sort of against each other, or people creating fiefdoms. Like those are all kind of, you know, objectively better than their opposites, right? At the same time, you know, having a diversity of perspectives at the table is something that's really, really important, right? And so we're running a little experiment right now in our company, trying something a little bit differently. And we have a couple managers that completely disagree with what we're doing. And we invited them into the process, knowing that they kind of don't think this is going to work, to try and take into account, like, you know, their concerns, like right up front. And we're actually having one of them run part of the experiment for us. And the reason we're doing that is because, you know, we think we probably have a better chance of succeeding, right? By including kind of like a differing viewpoint. And it gives them sort of ownership, and it lets them know that we value kind of their perspective, which is, you know, a little bit more, which is unique kind of inside the company. And we want to address the issues that they have, right? So, you know, we're sort of always looking to include a diversity of viewpoints, even when that means we may not have, like, you know, full agreement on a topic. That said, someone at the end of the day has to make a call and decide which direction you're going, right? And so that's kind of how we've tried to handle it, kind of in this one instance that literally we were talking about just a couple hours ago.
I would actually say that for, I think, a lot of companies that are early stage, just getting started, it's better to have less diversity ideologically on what you're doing. Everyone needs to be on the same page. And if you have too much diversity of kind of belief around what you're doing, it pulls the company in, you know, too many directions such that you can never take off. And so I think for a lot of people here who are, you know, thinking about what diversity means at their company as they're just getting started. Surely you want a diversity of backgrounds and perspectives, but I think that what's important is to have everyone have the same idea about where you're heading as a company. Whereas as you get larger, you know, you're kind of almost less on the attack and more on the defense, and you want to kind of spot things that the leadership team might not be spotting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. As it pertains to overall strategy, you've got to have like, hey, an agreement around we're moving in this direction. Even small teams, you can end up in situations where people differ on the tactics of how to get there. And I think even in a team of kind of 2 or 3, you know, you want to sort of balance and, you know, sort of validate the fact that like not everybody's going to agree, and collect an objective set of data that kind of gets everybody, you know, back on the same page. Because even in small groups, I think you can have, and like I'm working with a team of 3 co-founders right now in another company that have a very wide diversity of perspectives. And the way that they bring themselves kind of like, you know, into an agreement on something is by kind of trying to handle all of that, getting some data and then looking at the data together. And when they actually look at data and they're not just sort of like espousing opinions, then they're able to actually like, you know, agree, like this is what the 3 of us agree to do to kind of move forward. And I would say in that case, they probably have more challenges coming to some of the earlier points because there are 3 of them than they would if they have 1. But at the same time, they built a really unique product that addresses a very, you know, a very large need that no one of them could have actually built themselves.
There's great answers that resonate with my experience as well.
I guess another nugget to add, I think, is you know, and Jonathan, you pointed this out, and Jason, you said it without really highlighting it, which is disagreement about what to do, and then disagreement about how to do it, right? And so at the beginning, I think that it's critically important that everyone's rowing in the same direction and everyone has complete and total agreement on the what. And I think as you grow, you know, your focus on the how becomes, you know, it's not just what are we doing. Now there's entire people or teams or groups that are, you know, responsible for the how. And then people start having, you know, there's more to it then, and people start having more disagreement about what that how looks like. And I think the other nugget that's in there is sort of this concept of, you know, agreement and alignment aren't necessarily the same thing. And so, you know, in many cases, you know, there's 3 options for how to do something. You know, you believe in option A and the team goes with option B. It's like, as long as you raise your hand and you say, hey, look, I don't totally agree and here's why, and you were heard, you know, it is important for you to turn around and say, okay, well, you know, I've said my piece, I'm aligning with the plan, right? But I've already voiced my stance and reasoning for why I don't necessarily agree with it. But you still have to, you know, go full bore in whatever direction, you know, the group has decided to go, because, you know, if you're rowing in some other direction, that's going to be a big waste of time and effort.
All right. I'm going to break us out for a little bit because we got about 10 minutes now for pods, and then come on back for some awesome guest speakers. And if you didn't rename yourself, please help me out. Here we go. I'm opening the pods. Thanks, everybody. Whoop. Let's see. Is everybody, you guys are still here with me? Hello. Tom, hello. Raymond, I will assign you guys sort of random float. Let's see. How about 2?
I've been with Snake the past couple of times. I'd be down just falling out with him.
Okay. Snake it is.
Thanks.
And we got Rick. Hello.
Yep. How's it going? I can go wherever.
You can go wherever. How about Rat? Yeah. Bye. Tom, you like to, I'll put you where Bob Hulse is not as an IP. Got that covered. And was here, but where did I put him? Did he drop out? I thought he was here.
He was here.
Yeah. I don't see him anymore. Pick an animal.
I don't know. I was here. I wasn't here last week. I was with Josh Webb first week. I'm not sure who he's with.
Yeah. He is on the horse.
Let's go horse.
Horse up. Oh yeah, that's a good one. All right, thanks.